So as we delve deeper into the factors that led to the Salvadoran Civil War, it's essential to really understand the profound socioeconomic disparities that had been brewing for decades.
So we're picking up where we left off with this legacy of inequality that stretched back to the colonial period.
Yeah.
And it continued to shape El Salvador's social and political landscape.
Yes, the concentration of wealth in the hands of a small elite, primarily tied to the coffee industry, created a system where the vast majority of Salvadorans they lacked access to land, to education, to economic opportunity.
It sounds like a pressure cooker just waiting to explode.
Yeah.
Were there any specific events or triggers that kind of ignited the conflict?
Political repression played a significant role.
Right.
El Salvador was ruled by a series of military dictatorships that really brutally silenced any opposition. They used violence and intimidation to suppress dissent, targeting student groups, labor unions, anyone perceived as a threat to their power.
So it wasn't just economic inequality, it was also the lack of basic freedoms, the inability to peacefully advocate for change that contributed to the growing unrest.
Precisely. And this climate of fear was further intensified by the emergence of death squads, paramilitary groups operating with impunity and carrying out extrajudicial killings.
It's chilling to think about the level of violence that was being inflicted on ordinary citizens simply for expressing their views or demanding basic rights.
It was a truly dark period. One of the most prominent figures who spoke out against these injustices was Archbishop Oscar Romero.
Archbishop Romero, he became an icon, a symbol of resistance and hope in the face of this brutal repression.
Yes, he was a courageous voice who used his platform to denounce the violence and to call for social justice. He spoke directly to the suffering of the people, demanding an end to the killings and advocating for the rights of the poor and marginalized.
His assassination in 1980, while celebrating Mass, was a turning point, wasn't it? It kind of galvanized the opposition and fueled the flames of the conflict that had been simmering for so long.
It was a devastating loss, both for El Salvador and for the cause of human rights. His death really exposed the brutality of the regime and inspired many to take up this struggle for justice, even at the risk of their own lives.
This is where the conflict escalates into a full-blown civil war with leftist guerrilla groups like the FMLN challenging the government's authority.
Exactly. The FMLN, which was composed of various leftist factions, had been organizing for years, but Romero's assassination, coupled with the ongoing repression, provided the impetus for them to launch a full-scale armed insurgency.
And the government responded with even greater force, further escalating the cycle of violence.
Yes, the Salvadoran military, trained and equipped by the United States, engaged in this brutal counterinsurgency campaign. They saw the conflict through the lens of the Cold War, viewing the FMLN as a communist threat that needed to be eradicated.
So El Salvador became another battleground in this global ideological struggle between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Unfortunately, yes. The U.S. poured billions of dollars in military aid into El Salvador, supporting a regime that was responsible for widespread human rights abuses.
That U.S. involvement was highly controversial, wasn't it? There were accusations that the U.S. was turning a blind eye to the atrocities being committed by the Salvadoran military in the name of fighting communism.
It was a very dark chapter in U.S. foreign policy. Critics argued that the U.S. was prioritizing Cold War interests over human rights, propping up a repressive regime that was terrorizing its own people.
Right.
The lines between fighting communism and supporting state-sponsored violence became blurred.
One of the most horrific incidents of the war, and a stark reminder of the brutality unleashed during this conflict, was the El Mozote massacre in 1981.
The El Mozote massacre is it's a chilling example of the human cost of this conflict. The Salvadoran army, trained and equipped by the U.S., killed hundreds of unarmed civilians, including women and children, in a remote village.
It's hard to comprehend the level of cruelty involved in such an act. Was there any accountability for this massacre?
Initially, there were attempts to cover up the massacre. The Salvadoran government denied that it had occurred, and the U.S., for its part, downplayed the reports coming out of El Mozote. But But thanks to the perseverance of journalists and human rights activists, the truth eventually came to light.
It's a testament to the power of truth and justice, even in the face of such horrific violence and attempts to conceal it.
It also highlights the long-term consequences of such atrocities. The El Mozote massacre became a symbol of the war's brutality, a stain on the conscience of both the Salvadoran government and the U.S.
This conflict raged on for years, claiming tens of thousands of lives and displacing countless others. Was there ever any hope for peace during this dark period?
There were various attempts at peace talks throughout the war, but they often faltered. The Cold War dynamics with both sides receiving support from their respective superpowers made it difficult to find common ground.
But with the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, the geopolitical landscape kind of shifted dramatically.
Yeah.
Did that create an opportunity for a negotiated settlement in El Salvador?
It did. The FMLN, without Soviet backing, was more willing to come to the negotiating table. The Salvadoran government, under pressure from the international community and facing a war-weary population, also saw the need for a peaceful resolution.
And this led to the signing of the Chapultepec Peace Accords in 1992, marking the official end of the Salvadoran Civil War.
Yes, the Chapultepec Peace Accords were a monumental achievement. They weren't just a ceasefire.
Right.
They were a comprehensive agreement that addressed many of the root causes of the conflict.
So they went beyond just silencing the guns. They aimed to create a more just and equitable society, one where the conditions that led to the war wouldn't be repeated.
Exactly.
Right.
The accords called for a restructuring of the Salvadoran military, the creation of a new civilian police force, and investigations into human rights abuses. They also paved the way for the FMLN to transition from a guerrilla army to a legitimate political party.
It sounds like a truly transformative agreement, a blueprint for rebuilding El Salvador after decades of conflict.
It was a significant step towards peace and reconciliation, but the journey was far from over. The legacy of the war, the deep-seated social and economic inequalities, the trauma inflicted on individuals and communities. These were all challenges that El Salvador would continue to grapple with in the years to come.
So the signing of the peace accords wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with both hope and challenges.
And as we move into the present day, it's essential to explore how El Salvador has navigated this post-conflict period. What progress has been made, what challenges remain, and how does the shadow of the Civil War continue to shape the nation's present and future.
These are all questions that we'll delve into in the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore the resilience of the Salvadoran people, their efforts to rebuild their lives and their nation, and the ongoing struggle to create a more just and equitable society. So we've journeyed through centuries of El Salvador's history, witnessing its triumphs and its tragedies.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious to kind of explore how the nation has navigated the aftermath of the Civil War. What does daily life look like for Salvadorans today?
It's a complex picture. While El Salvador has made strides in rebuilding its infrastructure and establishing democratic institutions,
right,
the scars of the war, they run deep.
I imagine those scars kind of manifest in various ways. What are some of the most pressing challenges that El Salvador faces today?
One of the most significant is gang violence. Groups like MS-13 and Barrio 18, with roots tracing back to the displacement and social upheaval of the war, have really become entrenched in many communities.
It's a tragic example of how the cycle of violence can perpetuate itself even after the official end of a conflict. What steps have been taken to kind of address this issue?
Well, the government has implemented a range of strategies, including social programs aimed at providing youth with alternatives to gang life, as well as more hardline approaches like the mano dura policy.
I've heard that term before, mano dura. Could you elaborate on what that entails?
So mano dura, which translates to iron fist, is a policy that's really focused on aggressive law enforcement tactics, including mass arrests and increased police presence in gang-controlled areas.
It sounds like a controversial approach.
Yeah.
Has it been effective?
The effectiveness of mano dura is is hotly debated.
Right.
While some argue that it's brought down crime rates, others point to concerns about human rights violations and the potential for further marginalization of already vulnerable communities.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance trying to address the very real threat of gang violence,
Right.
while also upholding human rights and ensuring that law enforcement efforts are just and equitable. Are there other challenges kind of beyond gang violence that are hindering El Salvador's progress?
The socioeconomic inequalities that fueled the Civil War still persist.
Yeah.
El Salvador continues to struggle with poverty, limited access to education and health care, and a lack of economic opportunities, particularly in rural areas.
It seems like we've come full circle. The legacy of colonization, the concentration of wealth in a few hands, the lack of opportunity for the majority, these issues seem to be like deeply woven into the fabric of El Salvador's history.
Yeah, that's a keen observation.
Yeah.
These historical patterns continue to shape El Salvador's present day realities, and one consequence of this ongoing inequality is migration.
Right.
Many Salvadorans facing limited prospects in their own country make the difficult decision to leave, seeking better opportunities elsewhere.
It's a story that resonates far beyond El Salvador's borders.
Mm.
We see similar patterns of migration across Latin America and around the world,
Yeah.
driven by economic disparities, political instability, and the search for a brighter future.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Right.
But it's important to recognize that migration is often a symptom of deeper structural problems,
Right.
problems that need to be addressed at their root.
Speaking of addressing root problems, how has El Salvador's political system evolved since the end of the war? Have the democratic institutions established by the peace accords taken hold?
El Salvador has held regular elections and seen a degree of political pluralism.
Okay.
However, concerns remain about corruption, about transparency, and the influence of powerful elites.
It sounds like building a truly robust and accountable democracy is an ongoing process, a work in progress. It requires vigilance and active participation from citizens to ensure that those democratic principles are upheld.
Absolutely. And this is where the resilience and determination of the Salvadoran people really come into play. Despite the challenges they face, they continue to strive for a better future.
I've read about their vibrant culture, their strong family ties, their love of music and art. It seems like a nation that finds joy and strength in community and creativity, even in the face of adversity.
You're right. Art in particular has played a vital role in both processing the trauma of the war and envisioning a more hopeful future.
Mm-hmm.
There's a vibrant mural movement in El Salvador with artists using public spaces to tell stories, to commemorate victims, and to inspire hope.
Yeah, it's a testament to the power of art as a tool for healing, for resistance, and for social change. And speaking of social change, I know that women have played a vital role in El Salvador's struggle for justice and equality.
Absolutely. Women were at the forefront of the peace movement during the Civil War, and they continue to be leaders in their communities, advocating for social justice, for economic empowerment, and for human rights.
Right.
Their voices and perspectives are essential to understanding El Salvador's past, present, and future.
As we reflect on this journey through El Salvador's history, from colonization to the present day, what key insights kind of stand out to you?
For me, El Salvador's story really highlights the interconnectedness of history, how events from centuries past continue to shape the present. It underscores the importance of understanding those historical legacies in order to address contemporary challenges.
It also reminds us that peace is not simply the absence of war. It's an ongoing process, a commitment to building a more just and equitable society.
Right.
A society where the root causes of conflict are addressed.
Yes.
And all citizens have the opportunity to thrive.
And while El Salvador's journey has been marked by immense challenges, it's also a story of resilience, of the human spirit's capacity to endure and to hope even in the face of, unimaginable hardship.
El Salvador's story is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the flame of hope can continue to flicker.
It's a story that deserves to be heard, a story that offers valuable lessons for us all as we navigate our own complex and ever-changing world. I encourage you to continue your own deep dive into El Salvador, exploring its rich culture, its complex history, and the inspiring stories of its people.
Thank you for watching episode 6 of Rise of a Nation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe for more. Write in the comments what country's independence and expansion you would like me to cover next.